Yeah, let me just stop you there for a minute. So,
yes.
If we've allowed in the last, 25 years roughly, an increase in immigration from relatively low-wage countries, and the people who come here are predominantly low skill. And my argument has always been that that's great for them, just like low prices of imports are good for most Americans. That's good for people who hire lower skilled labor, whether that's a customer who wants a ride in a taxi or somebody wants their house repaired or cleaned or their lawn cut, and things that require relatively low skills. That's been good for most people. But it's also true, it would seem to me, and this is I'm with you and I'm with George partially, Borjas. This is not the crux of the matter, but it is one aspect of the matter that I could imagine that people who do compete in that niche of low-skill workers that who are already here could be harmed. Maybe in the long run. Certainly it's plausible they'd be harmed in the short run. And my thought about that is that Borjas's findings that show that the demand curve slopes downward, which is just, again, a fancy way of saying that when there's an increase in labor, the wage goes down, holding everything else constant. I'm perfectly okay with that. In the sense that his findings are quite small. The impact on the wages of low-skill workers who are harmed, the impact is quite small. It's mostly high school dropouts. And it seems to me that instead of keeping out immigrants, we ought to try to keep people in high school, that would be the appropriate policy response to that empirical finding. And yet that is not always the case. So react to that point.
Just as a footnote, you could even argue that it is antithetical to the goal of keeping people in high school to prop up the wages of people who do not finish high school. But let's get to the real question of what are the impacts. It's obvious that labor demand curves are downward sloping. As you say, that tells you something about the microscopic proximate impact on a worker of another worker competing for a job. This afternoon, if you and three other people are answering an advertisement and one of you gets it, well, that might affect the wage that you would insist on for getting a job next week, and might tend to drive down wages. But there's so much else that goes on in an economy, and this is where I get frustrated with a literature on immigration that is focused exclusively on labor economics. So, what are some of the things wrong with that? So one is that native workers and immigrant workers are even people who look similar in statistical data. Let's say people who have less than high school education are not in competition with each other to anywhere near the degree that a lot of people assume they might be. And a completely separate thing is that the demand for the labor of low-skill natives is bolstered by all kinds of economic forces to which immigrants contribute. That is, the jobs that a lot of low-skill immigrants have now exist because there has been low-skill immigration to this country. So let's talk about each of those separately, because they are completely separate issues. I've been writing recently about a point that Lant Pritchett of Harvard and also Center for Global Development brought up, which is the massive disparity between the supply of low-skill Americans and the Bureau of Labor Statistics projections for the demand for low-skill workers in this country. So if you take the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics projections for increase in employers' demand for certain occupations over the coming decade, they do it for 2010 to 2020, but it's more or less the decade to come. And you look just at the occupations which do not require a high school degree. So we're talking about basic personal care, care for the elderly, basic child care. We're talking about warehousers, back of the restaurant, food service workers, basic construction workers, landscapers. These are some of the highest growth occupations in the country. If you add up just those and the others in the top 20, which do not require a high school degree, and ask over the next decade how many more jobs will there be, how many more people will employers be demanding in those areas, it comes out to about 3 million more people. And if you look at the Census Bureau's projections for how many working age Americans there are going to be entering the labor force in the same time period, it is 1.7 million people. So think about that for a second. The 3 million is the demand for additional low-skill workers, and the entire growth in the whole U.S. labor force is going to be about half that amount.
But if I'm a low-skilled worker, that's great. And if we keep out those low-skilled immigrants, that means I'm going to get a much higher wage, and we're going to have a lower poverty rate in the United States. Again, I don't find this argument compelling, but that's the argument that would seem to follow if you believe those BLS projections.
Sure, but what about the employers of the other half? I mean, let's say hypothetically every single American entering the labor force, every last person took a low-skill job. No reason to go to college, no reason to even finish high school. For any of them, all of the new American labor force entrants over the next 10 years did these jobs. That would leave half of them unfilled. So those are people with nobody to take care of their grandparents, nobody to cook food in the restaurant. That's impoverishment of the whole country. Well, that would kill economic activity.
Well, I'm not so sure. I take the point that there would be an impact on the non-skilled population because the prices would be higher, but we assume there'd be substitution in various. Because I don't find that argument to be a very compelling argument for immigration. Just like this argument you hear that if we didn't allow immigrants in, we wouldn't get our food picked. We'd get it picked. It'd just be picked by people who were now paid a lot more. There might be less of it picked. It might be picked by machines now. We'd figure the economy, I think, would adjust, just as it would if there were a plague, God forbid, or other things that restricted labor supply that we didn't have policy control over.
Sure.
So to me,
to a degree.
So to me, that's not. I personally don't like that argument. I don't find it convincing. Give me something else.
To a degree, that's true. It is also true that if the price of U.S.-picked cucumbers went up by a certain amount, there wouldn't be any more U.S.-grown cucumbers, and that would be to the detriment of U.S. GDP. Yep. It's also true that if child care gets to a certain point, there are parents who are not going to enter the labor force. This is something that Patricia Cortes at Boston University has shown in a couple of excellent papers. It's also true that I recently had the experience of being an employer of elder care workers, and there was a certain amount of retirement savings. And if the wages we were paying were double, that means that we would have gotten a lot less care, and we would have had to go through all kinds of machinations to make that happen. So yes, some substitution can happen to some degree. However,
low prices are really good. I'm all for it. For the economy as a whole. So we agree on that. So, but I think you had another point you wanted to make.
Yes. No, all I want to argue, I don't want to argue that this is some sort of mechanistic relationship. I am just arguing that there is a lot less competition between these people and U.S. low-skilled workers, I think, than people tend to assume. I don't think that most people realize the gigantic demand for low-skill work that's happening in this country, and how much greater it is than the number of Americans willing to do low-skill work right now.
Fair enough.
But more important is this second concern, which is that that low-skill workers have indirect economic effects on all kinds of other things. So when low-skill workers from abroad and low-skilled workers here work together, they often specialize in different tasks and make each other more productive. You see that on farms, in which you have two people with who might, in a George Borjas regression, look similar, having a high school or less education and be 25 years old, but they tend to specialize in different things. Often because of language skills and for other reasons. You find that there is also complementarity between the skill groups. I mentioned the work of Patricia Cortes suggesting that when child care by low-skilled workers is cheaper, more high-skilled women, people with doctoral degrees and law degrees tend to participate in the labor force, work outside the home, and that grows the economy. Patricia Cortes has another paper in the Journal of Political Economy pointing out that low-skill immigrants have driven down the prices of some essential services, which raises the real wage of all other workers. You mentioned the relationship between between the education choices, the choice to stay in school, go to college or not, and the price of low-skilled labor, the price of high-skilled labor. Jenny Hunt, who's currently she's at Rutgers usually, but right now she's the Department of Labor chief economist, has a recent and fascinating paper in which she argues that the availability of low-skilled labor and the consequent effects on the wage structure of high-skilled versus low-skilled labor have encouraged people, unsurprisingly, to stay in school more. I believe she looks across U.S. states, which states have gotten more and which states have gotten fewer low-skilled workers in recent years, and finds that in places where low-skilled labor is more available, U.S. workers not wanting to compete in that market have tended to get more educated. And that makes the entire economy more productive as well. And we also mentioned a few minutes ago that the existence of some subsectors of the economy that depends on the availability of low-skilled labor. That yes, there are parts of U.S. agriculture that can be mechanized in the short term. There are many parts that there is no profitable way to mechanize right now. Lettuce picking, melons, cucumbers, apples. There are machines that help fully mechanizing it and getting products that are of the quality that can compete with imports is not now possible. And at least in the shorter medium term, those industries would not exist. There are lots of other sectors that really can't be mechanized. Think of most aspects of elder care are not going to be mechanized anytime soon. They can't be traded. They are person-to-person interactions. Lant Pritchett calls them hardcore non-tradables, things that it's hard to envision how they're going to be substitutable by technological change or international trade anytime soon. We really have a long list of ways in which low-skilled labor, through various channels, by creating sectors of the economy, by changing people's educational choices, by encouraging female labor force participation, by making high-skilled workers more productive, by making other, through specialization, low-skilled workers more productive. All of these things are, in economic terms, they are shifting out the demand curve for those people's labor, even as they're being driven down that curve. And this is offsetting
the potential effects of the labor supply change.
Exactly. And this is why in the state of the art in the analysis of the overall effects of low-skill immigration, which is right now a paper in the Journal of the European Economic Association last year by Ottaviano and Peri, finds that even for low-skill workers, even for less than high school educated workers, the cumulative, I believe it's 15 years, either 15 or 20, I don't remember exactly, of immigration in the latest data has a positive effect on the wages of workers, and this is through this offsetting shifting of the demand curve, even as obviously U.S. workers are moving down that curve.
Yeah, I have to say, again, as emphatically supportive as I am of allowing more people to move freely across borders, the empirical literature trying to tease out these effects make such incredibly heroic assumptions about the nature of the production process.
Yes.
The only thing I would say about this literature, I think it's important to emphasize it, is that even the people who are hostile to immigration, to increased immigration, who presumably have a tendency to make the assumptions. Again, there are many to make, trying to measure and tease out the independent effect of more immigration, do find a relatively small effect. Relatively small is, I think, if I remember correctly, and you correct me if I'm wrong, that the increased immigration of low-skill workers to America over the last couple of decades may have lowered high school dropout salaries by 5%. And that seems like an incredibly small price to pay to encourage people to stay in high school and to allow people to come here and may have better lives.
So if I'm remembering correctly, it's 8% in the 2003 Quarterly Journal of Economics paper by George Borjas.
That's why I said like 5%. That's my confirmation bias.
No.
Sorry, 8%.
It is on the order of 5%. I think he finds 8%. For the average American worker, he finds 3%. And really, this is a great point that you're making. It's worth pointing out that the big debate with Borjas and others on one side, and David Card and Giovanni Peri on the other side, is over numbers that are tightly circumscribed around zero. Is it plus 1%? Is it negative 3%? Because, as you said, we're talking about the cumulative effect of decades of migration. This is not a per year effect. This is decades and decades of all immigration, authorized and unauthorized, in all sectors from all countries. Borjas'